This is a Sports Catastrophe production. Hey there, ho there. It's Jeff Cutastrophe and welcome you to another Sports Catastrophe on this day. And on this day, November the 11th, yes, we remember because it's the Armistice Day of 1918 that World War I has ended. However that may be, this is a sports thing on this day. And not much happened, but due to I'm going to use my national pride card and say that in 1997 that it was announced that the Cy Young winners were awarded, and both winners came from the two major league clubs in Canada. Now I know that the picture sees Clemens and Pedro in different uniforms, but unfortunately the internet didn't give me a picture of both Pedro and Clemens in their Montreal and Toronto uniforms. 1997 was a crazy year. This was the first year that Italy came in, and then we could see a Montreal-Toronto regular season matchup in the regular season for games that count, like 3 of them. And the series in 1997 that saw Montreal head to Toronto for a 3-game series was classic. 2 straight pitchers duels start. June 30th was Pedro knocking down the Blue Jays with many strikeouts, as Pedro would out-duel Pat Hankin. And then on Canada Day, 1997, it was Roger Clemens versus Jeff Juden. And Roger Clemens pitched well, but Jeff Juden outdid Roger Clemens and with 14 strikeouts and Montreal winning 2-1 for the second straight day. Toronto got their revenge in the 3rd game of the series, but still it was amazing to see Pedro and Roger Clemens win the Cy Youngs in 97, and then they face each other, and then they face each other's teams within a pair of days. Roger Clemens came over on a 3-year deal with the Toronto Blue Jays. They paid him just a little bit more than the Bo Sox did. And it didn't help Boston that Dan Duquette, the general manager, basically said that Clemens was losing it, despite the fact that in his second last start, and in his last win as a Red Sox, Clemens threw a 20 strikeout performance against the Detroit Tigers. So obviously Clemens was in the twilight of his career, and he decided to move to Toronto for the challenge. There was a massive challenge involved. I mean, the Toronto Blue Jays did have the reigning AL Cy Young champ, and that's Pat Hankin. Unfortunately, with Pat Hankin, that Cy Young is kind of tainted because a lot of people said Andy Pettitte deserved the Cy Young over Pat Hankin, and I kind of agree, despite the fact that, I'm a Blue Jay fan through and through. However, I want to say that, Hankin did okay and all that. But anyway, Roger Clemens was going to be the main guy for the Blue Jays. He had a few blips on the screen, but Roger Clemens was just unbeatable in a sense. He had a big winning streak. I believe it was 98 that he did, but anyway. In 97, he was proving worthy for the Blue Jays, and the Blue Jays may have found the pitching prowess. Unfortunately, the Blue Jays didn't do well in the AL East and weren't close to getting to the playoffs in 97. 98, they won 88 games, which got them 3rd in the AL East. And those pesky Yankees and Red Sox. And the worst part is, the current World Series champion Atlanta Braves won 88 games themselves. And this is 2021, and they friggin' made the playoffs, and the Jays didn't. Just pissing me off. Well, the fact of the matter is that Roger Clemens was pitching properly. I mean, I never got to see Roger Clemens pitch in the games I went to, but he was still pretty good and all that. He proved to the Bo Sox that he could pitch well. In fact, he pitched a memorable appearance, I think it was July 1998, in Boston at Fenway Park, and he gave a giant Texas-sized glare at the GM's box in Boston, at the owner's box, and, all hell broke loose. But Clemens was a strikeout artist, over 300 strikeouts. He actually led the AL in wins, strikeouts, and ERA, what they called the pitcher's triple crown. Anyhow, Roger Clemens was bringing the Blue Jays some power numbers. 98, he did just as well and won another Cy Young Award. Unfortunately for the Blue Jays, Clemens didn't want to pitch in Toronto. I guess maybe because of the fact that they weren't really contending. So he forced a trade, and the Jays traded him to the Yankees for David Wells, who was in his second stint of duty with the Blue Jays then. He was a never-do-well spot starter / reliever who wasn't that well. David Wells did pretty well for the Blue Jays, but unfortunately injuries would get him, and then they traded him to the White Sox. I think it was the Mike Soroka deal. That actually blew up in our faces. But yeah, the Blue Jays trading Clemens to the Yankees, it blew up in the Jays' face, and they weren't really contending for a long time. But Roy Halladay was coming around as a pitcher, although he didn't really start to pitch well until 2001. Anyway, on the other side of the coin was the National League Cy Young winner, Pedro Martinez. After starting out life as an LA Dodger, being a spot starter / reliever, Tommy Lasorda figured that Pedro's very lean frame was not going to get him anywhere. So he decided to dump Pedro off to the Expos. The Expos wanted a good starting pitcher, and they almost lost Dennis Martinez to the Braves, but Dennis Martinez vetoed their trade to Atlanta. However, they knew they couldn't keep Dennis Martinez, and they lost Dennis Martinez to Cleveland for the 94 season. In exchange, the Expos gave second baseman Delino DeShields up to the Dodgers. The Dodgers needed a second baseman. Jody Reed was gone, so they needed a second baseman, Delino DeShields. Make no mistake that he did okay for the Dodgers, and Expos fans vilified Montreal management for trading away Delino DeShields because he was a good second baseman. But it brought up Mike Lansing in a way that he was decent. And what did Pedro do in 94? He nearly threw a no-hitter at home in his first home start as an Expo, but unfortunately, it didn't seem to happen, as he missed a no-hitter, and he had that big brawl with Reggie Sanders of the Reds. Pedro was pitching quite well. He even had a perfect game going in 95 in San Diego. Unfortunately, he did it for 9 innings. Unfortunately, the Expos couldn't score, so the game had to continue. He gave up a double to Bip Roberts, but the Expos still won the game in the 10th inning, 1-0. So, nothing wrong. Pedro was pitching well. 96, he did okay. 97, he was off the map. Like, this guy was helping Montreal do well. Well, Montreal didn't really do well in the standings, but hey, he was a power pitcher, and fans loved him. And then freaking money came involved. Montreal just had to get rid of him, kind of a salary dump. They traded him to Boston for the one of Tony Armas Jr. and Carl Pavano. Pavano would be okay in Montreal, like he'd be decent. Armas Jr. could have been a good pitcher for the Expos, but no, he wasn't. So the Expos basically threw Pedro to Boston, and in Boston, Pedro was the pitcher that Boston needed after Clemens skipped town, and he helped Boston get to many postseason appearances. Famously in 1999, with the Red Sox and Indians in a tight 5-game series in the LDS, the League Division Series, Pedro came onto the mound in the 5th inning of Game 5 and pitched 5 shutout innings as the Red Sox took care of the Indians. It was hard to believe and all that. The fact of the matter is that Pedro and Roger did better after leaving Toronto and Montreal. Kind of pissy, don't you think? I mean, the Expos, of course, would falter and head to Washington for the 2005 season and beyond. And the Blue Jays weren't really competitive after Clemens left till, what was a good year we were? Till like 2015. The Blue Jays would always be in the shadow of the Yankees and the Red Sox. But 2015 is when the Blue Jays broke out finally. Kind of pissing me off, but whatever. Anyway, I still think Roger Clemens and Pedro Martinez deserve their Cy Youngs, despite the fact that Clemens was in the Mitchell report because of that stupid athletic trainer by the name of Brian McNamee, or whatever how you pronounce it. He was the douchebag who got Clemens on that medication, and he was a Blue Jay person, pissing me off. So much so, I had a nice Roger Clemens t-shirt with the Blue Jays on it that I got at a thrift store. I gave that up because I'm like, I can't stand it. Ron Clemens and Boudreaux's shirt, it's just going to remind people of the PED stuff. And that's pretty much why Clemens is not in the Hall of Fame. Although people are warmed up to him, in a sense, giving him better Hall of Fame votes. I think him and Pedro are good pitchers. But I mean, drugs will ruin Clemens, and Montreal Expo fans will probably be wondering, what if Pedro stayed in Montreal past 97? We'll never know. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. I do.